Welcome to Real Talk About the Town, Proposition 50, California Redistricting, Special Election Edition. I am Saleem Gilmore. After the census, which is completed every 10 years, states, counties, and cities revisit their district maps, make changes based on census population and demographic data. When necessary, district lines are redrawn to balance the number of voters in each district and to assure the continuity of communities of interest. This process is called redistricting. In this politically charged national climate, with some states redistricting to disenfranchise Democratic voting blocs, California has stepped into the political fray. Proposition 50 is a ballot initiative that, if approved by voters, will return the responsibility of redistricting to elected officials in the state legislature. Can you walk us through some of the nuts and bolts of Prop 50?
In Prop 50, this policy, if you vote yes on Prop 50, you are saying the California legislature can redraw the U.S. House districts in California. Specifically, they argue to combat the Republican gerrymander in Texas that has given Republicans more U.S. House seats from Texas. And the argument from California and the legislature and the governor is that California, this blue state, should balance out Texas's additional Republican seats through giving the authority of the legislature to draw more Democratic districts in Prop 50.
So we have Prop 50 on the ballot. As you said, it's in response to what's been happening in Texas, where the legislature, if I understand correctly, is redistricting in Texas. I wanted you to share with us what triggered that redistricting effort in Texas and help us unpack exactly what gerrymandering is.
Such an important question. First is that now we're in a nationally polarized politics. National Republican team fighting against the National Democratic Party team. This is actually very different than earlier in U.S. history. For example, the mid-20th century and Jim Crow, it wasn't so partisan. It was very polarized on race and civil rights and other issues and by north-south geography, but not by party. If you were a Northern Democrat in the 1950s and 60s, you're probably pro-civil rights and pro-labor, kind of left-wing member of Congress from the Democratic Party. But if you were a Southern Democrat, you were mostly a Dixiecrat segregationist. That had the left-wing pro-civil rights candidates and the anti-civil rights right-wing candidates in the same party. Right? That doesn't happen anymore. Now we have a liberal party and a conservative party. You can debate how left or right they are, but they're two teams that are fighting against each other nationally. This gives a new incentive for no matter where you are in the country to make sure your state's legislative districts for state legislature and for the U.S. House and Congress are the most advantageous for your national party team. So now if you're a Democratic voter in California and you want the Democrats to win nationally, take control of Congress, you have an interest in gerrymandering California to have more Democratic Party seats. If you're in Texas and you're a Republican voter, you have an incentive to create more Republican seats through gerrymandering. And this gets at what gerrymandering is. It's drawing maps, legislative maps for a particular political purpose, either partisan gerrymandering to get your party more seats in Congress or in your state legislature, and historically, racial gerrymandering, of course, was very powerful to disenfranchise often black voters by putting them in districts where they weren't able to elect black candidates of choice. The voice of black voters was not heard in part through Jim Crow voting laws and voter suppression making it hard to vote in the first place, but also through legislative gerrymandering. And I will say legally still, so the Supreme Court rolled back what's called Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act in 2013 in the Shelby County decision. That means that sort of did open up opportunities for states to do new voter suppression laws and new forms of gerrymandering. But they left the rest of the Voting Rights Act so far. This court may further cut the Voting Rights Act, but the Voting Rights Act Section 2 is one of the key pieces of the Voting Rights Act, and these later judicial rulings said you can't do racial gerrymanders. It's federally illegal to empower different racial groups against each other, and it's especially illegal to have majority groups, especially white voters, block consistently the candidates of choice of a racial minority group, and it was originally written mostly for Black Americans. This has also been interpreted for Latinos, Asian Americans, Native Americans. So racial gerrymandering is still illegal, but partisan gerrymandering is actually legal. Like it's okay to say, I'm drawing this map to disempower the other party, but it's not okay to say I'm drawing this map to disempower Black people.
If Proposition 50 passes on November 4th, the legislature will redraw the California congressional maps that will be used in 2026, 2028, and 2030. The Independent Redistricting Commission will reconvene in 2031 and draw a new set of congressional maps based on the 2030 census. Help me understand what the communities of interest mean, that phrase, communities of interest, and how this relates to redistricting in individual areas.
Communities of interest are in law around redistricting is crucial. So, if you've heard of gerrymandering, you probably know about funny-shaped legislative districts that look pretty crazy on a map. Those districts are sometimes challenged for breaking up communities of interest. So criteria of like what is legal to do in redistricting. You can gerrymander in favor of one party or another. That is legal. You're not able to gerrymander in favor of racial groups or against racial minority voters, Black, Latino, Asian American, Native American voters. All that's true. And you also are meant to draw maps that don't break up communities of interest that are historical communities around some sort of given geography or a town or something like that. You hope to incorporate that whole community of interest into one district and not split it up.
How do you see Prop 50 impacting Black communities and other communities of color in California?
Black Americans have consistently been champions of small d democracy and voting rights and principles of electoral democracy, political equality, and one person, one vote. Those are, like, going back to ancient Greece, principles of democracy, rule by the people. Black Americans have consistently been attached to that and consistently been the most interested of all the issues, right? We can care about tax policy, the environment, whatnot. Black Americans are consistently interested and knowledgeable about the rules of American democracy because historically it's really mattered, of course, for the rights of Black people to participate as full citizens in American society. And I would say now we see actually in this era, and actually the past 15 years, Black Americans have increasingly informed themselves about voting rights in general. And when you survey Americans, what are your top issues? Black Americans are really the only community saying things like, the right to vote is a top interest right now. And I think on Prop 50, I do think Black voters and in general, the Black community has a lot to say on, again, Prop 50, which is about the rules of the game and about the balance of national power.